All right, guys, we're hearing it everywhere. Marry the house, date the rate. Legit strategy or no?
You better get fired up.
All right, thanks for joining us today. Whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, if you've got questions, comments, or anything of the sort, please put it in the comments. And before the video, Lissette and I will absolutely address them. Lissette, I appreciate you joining me today.
Thank you. How are you, Joe?
I'm amazing, man. So I hear it all the time, and it kind of happened when rates started going up. Of course, realtors as salespeople are going to come up with some sort of pitch to get people to keep moving, right? So the question is, if you're a buyer, is it legit? Is it something I should be buying into, or is it just a sales tactic? And before I ask you what it is, I want to kind of explain it for anybody who's hearing this and they're like, I don't know if I understand what you're saying, Joe. Marry the house, date the rate. What it's saying is, get the house that you love today. Don't worry about the rates, because if rates drop, you can easily change your rate by refinancing, right? So if rates in 12 months, 24 months, 36 months reduce, you can just refinance. Now you get that new rate and you don't have to really worry about it. That is the strategy, I guess, with marry the house, date the rate. What are your thoughts on that? What are you telling to buyers who ask you about that strategy?
I think it's very catchy. I like the slogan. But you know what? I'm a very cautious realtor. I really like to understand the position that my client's in and what they foresee themselves in the future. It's not so easy to refinance for everyone. You have so many factors that come into play. So I would say if you need to buy and buying is on the path that you are on, let's look at the bigger picture. First of all, the rates have increased, but we're not at an all-time high. So it's not something that should deter you from buying.
Or you're near it. Yeah.
Exactly. If it's something that you need to do and you need to buy, don't be deterred by the interest rates at all.
Yeah.
But also be mindful of your budget. You are buying today, and even though you plan to refinance tomorrow, there's no guarantee 6 months to a year or interest rates are going to be lower. So can you afford today's payment for the next 30 years?
Yeah.
And if there were to be an emergency where you need to sell a house, are you in a position where you're going to be at a loss? So take all those things into account. Also knowing 7%, 7.5% sounds high, but overall looking the past 20, 25, 30 years, it really is not.
I agree with you 100%. And kind of the discussion that I have is you've got to kind of compartmentalize some of this stuff, right? People see the rates that we had 12 months ago, 2%, 3%, 4%, and they want it because the grass is greener on the other side, right? So they say, oh, I wish I would have gotten it. I didn't get it. So I'm going to whatever. Maybe you're going to rent, whatever it is you're going to do, right? It doesn't really matter what it is that you're going to do. And so they don't move forward. Sometimes that's a good decision. Sometimes it's not. And I did a video on this the other day. If you're living with mom and dad and it's free, do it financially. That is probably a much better decision than, or I should say, at least it's considerable in being a better decision than buying. But if you're going to rent and you're going to go blow $2,500 a month instead of spending $2,700 a month on buying, it probably doesn't make sense to rent, right? So then the question comes down, if you're looking at, should I buy now? If you can afford to buy now, run the numbers, and I am more than happy to sit down with you. I know Lisette's more than happy to sit down with you and run maybe a 5-10 year timeline to see whatever it is I want to do, whether it's rent, live with mom and dad, whatever, how would that compare financially to buying? And if you can afford it, I'll tell you in most cases, if you're renting, it's probably going to make sense to buy, even if rates were higher than they are now, because you're going to pay that. Lissette goes out and she buys a $400,000 rental, and she buys it with the intent of renting it out to somebody. If her rate is 7, 8, 9, 10%, whatever her payment is, she's got to charge you, the renter, plus a couple $100 because she's got to make some profit. That's why people invest in investment properties, right? So if rates go up, rents are going to go up, right? If prices go up, rents are going to go up. So you're not going to save money over the long haul. Maybe you will over the short term, and so you rent, but then when you go to rent again in the next year, and we've seen this happen time over the last 2 to 3 years as we've had this explosion in prices, people think they're beating the system by renting short term, but then their rent doubles And now prices have gone up 100, 200 grand for that same home. Now they're screwed. So they got a sweet deal for 1 year, but now they're really taking it in the shorts over the long run, right? So I think, first of all, you have to say, can I afford to buy? You might be buying a home that you're not overly excited about. And I'll tell you, and Lissette, correct me if I'm wrong, 99% of people, if they're at a $300,000 budget, they want a $400,000 home. If they're at an $800,000 budget, it just doesn't cut it. I need $1 million home. It doesn't matter what your budget is. You're always going to want the next step higher, right? That's just the way our human minds work. So really ask yourself, can I live in the home I can afford? If you can, at today's rates, and you need to assume, this is what I would tell my kids, so this is what I would tell you. You need to assume rates are not going to go down.
Correct.
If they go down, it's a blessing, and you can refinance, and now you've built in some equity because you paid down your mortgage. Maybe your property has gone up in value, which is a plus, right? Instead of renting, and now Lisette's equity is going up instead of yours because she's your landlord. And your rates have gone down, so you can refi and you're in a sweet position. If rates go up, you just locked in at a lower rate instead of saying, I'm going to rent for another year. And now your options are, do I want to come in at a 1%, 2%, 3% increase in rates over the current rates? Or do I want to pay this now maybe $500 a month higher rent? And who knows how much that's going to continue going up. So I say this a lot. Sometimes we're not presented with A+ versus C- decisions. Sometimes it's C- versus D-, and you have to have the mental wherewithal, right? The maturity to be able to look at that and say, I know the C+ sucks, but that's the best decision moving forward logically right now, so I'm going to make it. And I'd say this one last thing, and then I'll turn it over to you, Lissette. One thing I don't see a lot of people doing, and I really wish they would, because I'd want myself to do it, I want my kids to do it, I want my mom to do it, is run the numbers. If you sit down with someone who does this day in and day out, like Lissette or myself or a lender, it's going to take us 10, 15, 20 minutes to literally run out what's going to impact you for the next decade of your life or more. And you'll now feel how intelligent it is to make the decision you're about to make. And maybe it's renting. You'll know with authority, with confidence, this makes sense. And now I see it because Lissette drew the numbers out for me. Or you'll see, oh my gosh, I'm so glad we did this because over a 5-10 year span, I'm going to walk with this much on average because of these numbers that I'm assuming here in these places. So really, I can't urge you enough. Run the doggone numbers. It doesn't take long, and you will make decisions with confidence, and they'll be educated decisions. Lissette, what are your last thoughts?
No, I couldn't agree more. And specifically, let's think about the future. Let's not think about what happened the past year or two. Yeah. Unfortunately, 2.5%, 3% interest rates just don't exist anymore. And again, we don't have a crystal ball to tell us what's going to happen in the future, but I feel it's probably not going to happen any near time in our future again. So let's look forward. Let's see what your options are. And specifically, my heart really goes out to the first-time home buyers that really want to get into a property and they feel deterred by this. Again, going back to what you said, running the numbers, looking at today's reality. This is how much house I can afford. This is what my payment's going to be. And knowing you're probably still in a better position that you may be if you wait 3, 4, 5 months where interest rate could be higher. So yeah, just think about it without also considering, well, I could always refinance. Try to make that decision based on this is going to be the next 30 years of my life or however long you want to live in that property. Yeah. And if you get the opportunity to refinance, great.
Yeah, the one cautious thing, and I think I indirectly said this, but I want to directly say it. If you cannot afford the payment because of today's rates for, maybe you've got enough money to afford it for a year or two, and you're like, I'm going to marry the house and date the rate, and hopefully rates come down so I can refi and afford it. Do not do that. Because you have my best guess is rates are maybe going to come down to 5.5 at best in the next 12 months. Maybe. They might stay where they're at. They might go up 1% or 2%. I would never tell my kids to do that if they couldn't afford it. Right. I'd tell them you need to get a roommate, which I know sucks. You need to move to Tennessee, which I know, no offense, Tennesseans, but sucks. This is Florida, baby. I love Florida. There's a lot of suck to it, but you have to do what you can afford first. Right. And then you can start talking about all the amenities you want to afford within your budget. But if you cannot afford it, I saw this with ARMs, adjustable rate mortgages in
Yeah.
08 and 09. And people were sold on the fact that, hey, rates aren't where we want them. Get in. You'll get a lower payment for 3, 5, 7 years, whatever it is up front. You can always sell. You can always refi. And you couldn't because the market tanked. And people got stuck in those mortgages that they couldn't afford. And that's when we saw massive foreclosure, right? So we're nowhere near that. I hate saying that word because some people are, is there going to be foreclosure? I'm not seeing that. But what I want you to know is if you can't afford it, don't do it. I don't care what salesman is telling you what. Do not do it.
Yeah.
But if you can't afford it, then yes, buy into Marry the House, Date the Rate. And if the rates come down, you can refinance. If they don't, you can still afford it. And if they go up, thank God I locked in when I did, and I didn't rent for another year, and now the rates are 2, 3, 4% higher, right? So,
exactly.
Lissette, I appreciate you. Thank you as always for educating these amazing buyers. Guys, have an amazing week. Lissette, I'll see you next time, my friend.